The humid air of Miami clung to my skin like a desperate lover as I navigated through the crowded beachfront bar. It was my third double shift this week, and my feet screamed in protest with each step. The ice in the cocktail shakers clinked rhythmically against the backdrop of pulsing music and drunken laughter, creating a symphony of chaos that had become the soundtrack to my life. "Table 7 needs another round," Marco barked, barely glancing my way as he slid the tray across the bar top. I nodded, balancing the drinks with practiced precision. At 26, I was already a veteran in the art of serving overpriced cocktails to entitled tourists while maintaining a smile that never quite reached my eyes. Tonight was particularly busy. Some wealthy businessman had rented out half the VIP section for what appeared to be an important meeting, disguised as a casual night out. "Excuse me," I murmured, squeezing between two sunburned men who didn't bother to move an inch. Their eyes followed me, as they always did, but tonight I was too exhausted to care. That's when I saw him. He sat alone at a corner table, partially hidden in the shadows, yet somehow commanding the entire room without saying a word. Unlike the other tourists with their gaudy Hawaiian shirts and camera-laden necks, he wore a crisp white linen shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. Dark aviator sunglasses concealed his eyes despite the dimming evening light, and his jaw, sharp enough to cut glass, remained perfectly still as he observed the crowd. Something about him made me pause. Perhaps it was the way others seemed to unconsciously give him space, or how the security guards glanced his way a little too often. Or maybe it was simply that in a sea of loud, desperate-to-be-noticed people, he sat in complete stillness, as if the world revolved around him and not the other way around. I shook the thought away. Another rich tourist thinking he owned the place. Miami Beach was full of them. "Your mojitos," I announced, placing the drinks on table 7 with practiced efficiency. "Anything else I can get you?" The group of middle-aged women giggled like schoolgirls, one of them boldly eyeing my figure. "We're good, honey. But if you see any single men worth our time, send them our way." I forced a laugh. "I'll keep an eye out." As I turned to head back to the bar, I collided with a solid wall of muscle. The impact sent me stumbling backward, and strong hands gripped my shoulders to steady me. A subtle scent of expensive cologne, sandalwood and something darker I couldn't name, filled my senses. "I'm sorry," I stammered, looking up. The man from the corner table had materialized in front of me, his sunglasses now hanging from his shirt pocket, revealing eyes so intensely blue they seemed almost unnatural against his tanned skin. "The fault is mine," he replied, his voice carrying a slight accent I couldn't place. Something European, perhaps Italian or Spanish. The sound was like velvet wrapped around steel. I wasn't watching where I was going. For a moment, we stood frozen. His hands still on my shoulders, I became acutely aware of the dampness of my uniform, the wisps of hair that had escaped my ponytail, and how small I felt in his presence. "No harm done," I managed, stepping back. His hands fell away, but the impression of his touch lingered. A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "What's your name?" Under normal circumstances, I would have deflected. Names created connections, and connections with customers never ended well. But something about his direct gaze made me answer honestly. "Ellie." "Ellie Moore." He nodded, as if filing the information away for future reference. "Ellie?" he repeated, my name sounding different in his mouth, almost precious. "I'd like a whiskey. Neat, the best you have." It wasn't a request, but a statement of fact. Before I could respond, he returned to his table, leaving me with the distinct feeling that I'd just had an encounter with something dangerous. Throughout the night, I found myself inexplicably drawn to his table. Each time I brought him a fresh drink, he would thank me with perfect politeness, sometimes asking simple questions about Miami or the bar. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that crossed any lines, yet each interaction left me feeling like I'd touched a live wire. "How long have you worked here?" he asked during my third visit to his table. "Almost 2 years," I replied, collecting his empty glass. "You don't sound like you're from Florida," I hesitated. "I'm not. I'm from a small town in Georgia." His eyes narrowed slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. "What brought you here?" The usual. Big dreams, small wallet. I attempted a light tone, but something in his expression told me he saw right through it. And what dreams would those be, Ellie Moore? The way he said my full name, like he was tasting it, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. I should get back to work, I said instead of answering, suddenly uncomfortable with his interest. He nodded, that almost smile appearing again. Of course. I wouldn't want to keep you from your duties. As my shift dragged on, I noticed a steady stream of men in dark suits appearing at his table. They would lean in, speak briefly, then disappear into the crowd. None stayed longer than a minute. With each visitor, his expression grew more severe, the line of his shoulders more rigid. By midnight, the bar had reached its peak capacity, bodies pressed against each other in a sweaty mass of vacation excitement. I was counting down the minutes until closing when Marco grabbed my arm. "The guy in the corner wants you specifically," he said, nodding toward the mysterious man. "Says he has a complaint about the service." My stomach dropped. Had I done something wrong? I mentally retraced our interactions, finding nothing that warranted a complaint. "What did he say exactly?" Marco shrugged. "Just that he wanted to speak with you. Better not keep him waiting. He looks like the type who tips big or breaks kneecaps." I rolled my eyes at Marco's dramatics, but made my way to the corner table. The man was on his phone now, speaking rapidly in what was definitely Italian, his voice low and controlled, but with an edge that hadn't been there earlier. He looked up as I approached, immediately ending his call. "Ellie," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "Please, sit." It wasn't a request I should have granted. Employees weren't supposed to sit with customers, but I found myself sinking into the chair anyway. "Marco said you had a complaint?" I asked, trying to keep my voice professional. He looked genuinely surprised. "A complaint?" "No. I simply wished to speak with you without you rushing off to serve another table." The tension in my shoulders eased slightly. "Oh. Well, I'm still on the clock, so I can't stay long. Of course." He leaned forward, arms resting on the table. "I'm leaving tomorrow. I wanted to invite you to dinner before I go." The straightforwardness of his proposal caught me off guard. Men asked me out at the bar all the time, but usually with cheesy pickup lines or drunken propositions. His direct approach was both refreshing and unsettling. "I don't even know your name," I pointed out. "Alessandro," he replied. "Alessandro Ricci." The name suited him, elegant and strong. "Well, Alessandro, I appreciate the offer, but I make it a policy not to date customers." It was a lie. I had no such policy. I simply didn't date. Period. My last relationship had left scars I wasn't eager to reopen. He studied me, those blue eyes seeming to read every thought crossing my mind. "It's just dinner, Ellie. At the restaurant in my hotel. Public place, excellent food." He paused, then added with surprising softness, "You look like you could use a good meal." It was true. Between rent, student loans, and sending money home to my mother, luxury items like good food had fallen by the wayside. "I don't know." I hesitated, conflict warring within me. Something shifted in his expression, a hardening I couldn't quite interpret. "You shouldn't tease a man like me," he said, his voice dropping to a register that sent goosebumps racing across my skin. "Excuse me?" "The looks you've been giving me all night," he clarified. "If you're not interested, that's fine. But don't play games you don't intend to finish." Heat flooded my cheeks. Had I been staring? Perhaps. But the accusation stung nonetheless. "I haven't been—" "Ellie!" Marco's voice cut through my denial. "Phone call for you. Says it's an emergency." My heart plummeted. Only one person had this number for emergencies. "I have to take this," I said, standing abruptly. Alessandro nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Of course." I rushed to the phone, my hands trembling as I picked up the receiver. "Hello? Mom?" My mother's tear-filled voice confirmed my fears. "Ellie, honey, it's happened again. The bank, they're saying they're going to foreclose if we don't make a payment by the end of the week." The room seemed to tilt. "How much do they need?" She named a sum that might as well have been $1 million for all my ability to produce it. "I'll figure something out," I promised, though I had no idea how. "Just hold on, okay? I'll call you tomorrow." After hanging up, I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes against the threat of tears. When I opened them, Alessandro stood before me, concern etched into his features. "Bad news?" he asked quietly. I straightened, wiping at my eyes. "Nothing I can't handle." He studied me for a long moment, then reached into his pocket and extracted a business card. "My dinner invitation stands. 7 o'clock tomorrow at the Setai. Ask for me at the host stand." He pressed the card into my palm, his fingers warm against mine. "No strings attached, Ellie. Just dinner." Before I could respond, he turned and left, cutting through the crowd with effortless authority. People instinctively moved out of his path, like water parting before the bow of a ship. I looked down at the card in my hand. It was heavy, cream-colored stock, with only his name and a phone number embossed in dark blue. No company, no title, just Alessandro Ricci. As I tucked the card into my pocket, a chill ran down my spine. A premonition, perhaps, of how that simple piece of paper would change everything. I didn't know then that Alessandro Ricci was not just a wealthy tourist, but the head of one of Italy's most powerful crime families. I didn't know that his interest in me wasn't coincidental, and I certainly didn't know that by the end of the week, I would belong to him. A payment for a debt I didn't even know existed. All I knew, as I watched his broad shoulders disappear through the exit, was that despite every warning bell clanging in my head, I would be at that restaurant tomorrow night. And somehow, I suspected he knew it too. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. I called my mother in the morning, assuring her that I was working on a solution to our financial problems, though I had no real plan. I picked up an extra lunch shift at the bar, pocketing the meager tips with grim determination. By the time I returned to my cramped studio apartment to prepare for dinner with Alessandro, I was exhausted but resolute. Standing before my closet, I surveyed my limited options. Most of my clothes were practical: jeans, t-shirts, the black uniform for the bar, nothing suitable for a restaurant at the Setai, which was one of Miami's most exclusive hotels. After much deliberation, I settled on a simple navy blue dress I'd worn to a college friend's wedding 2 years ago. It wasn't particularly fashionable, but it was the best I had. As I applied a light layer of makeup, I lectured myself sternly in the mirror. This was just dinner. I would be polite, enjoy an expensive meal I couldn't otherwise afford, and then never see Alessandro Ricci again. No matter how magnetic his presence, no matter how those blue eyes seemed to see right through me, this was a one-time event. The Setai loomed before me like a modernist fortress, all sleek lines and muted elegance. I hesitated at the entrance, suddenly acutely aware of my second-hand dress and scuffed shoes. The doorman, however, greeted me with practiced politeness, ushering me into a lobby that whispered of old-world luxury. "I'm here to meet Alessandro Ricci," I told the maitre d', my voice smaller than I intended. The effect of the name was immediate. The man's expression shifted from professional detachment to keen interest. "Miss Moore?" he inquired, and when I nodded, he continued, "Mr. Ricci is expecting you. Please, follow me." I was led not to the main dining room, but to a private terrace overlooking the ocean. The setting sun painted the sky in dramatic strokes of orange and purple, casting a golden glow over the single table set for two, and there, standing at the balustrade with his back to me, was Alessandro. He turned as I approached, and for a moment, I forgot to breathe. Gone was the linen shirt from the night before, replaced by a tailored charcoal suit that fit him with such precision it must have been made for him alone. His dark hair was swept back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face, and those penetrating blue eyes assessed me with unmistakable appreciation. "Ellie," he said, stepping forward to greet me, "you came." There was a note of genuine pleasure in his voice that caught me off guard. Had he expected me to refuse? I said I would. I replied, unsure why I felt defensive. "So you did." He gestured to the table. "Please sit." I took the liberty of ordering champagne. As I settled into my chair, I noticed 2 men standing discreetly by the entrance to the terrace. They wore dark suits and impassive expressions, their eyes constantly scanning the area. "Your security?" I asked, nodding toward them. Alessandro followed my gaze, his expression revealing nothing. "A necessary precaution in my line of work." "And what work is that exactly?" I ventured, accepting the glass of champagne he offered. The hint of a smile played at his lips. "Import-export primarily. My family has interests throughout Europe and we're exploring opportunities in the United States." It was vague enough to be meaningless, but I didn't press. Something told me he wouldn't appreciate further questioning. "And you?" he asked, steering the conversation away from himself. "You mentioned big dreams when we spoke last night. What are they?" I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles dancing on my tongue. "Originally, I wanted to be a chef. I came to Miami for culinary school." His eyes sharpened with interest. "Originally? What changed?" The question probed at old wounds. "Reality," I said simply. "Tuition was more than I expected. I had to drop out after the first year when my mom got sick. Now I'm just trying to keep my head above water." A shadow passed over his features. "And the phone call last night? Another reality?" I looked away, uncomfortable with his perceptiveness. "My mother's house is being foreclosed on. The bank wants a payment by the end of the week." "How much?" The directness of the question startled me. "That's not... I didn't come here to talk about my problems." "How much, Ellie?" he repeated, more gently this time. I named the figure reluctantly, the same number that had kept me awake all night. He nodded thoughtfully, then reached into his jacket and extracted a sleek leather checkbook. Before I could process what was happening, he was writing with practiced efficiency. "What are you doing?" I asked, alarmed. He tore the check free and held it out to me. "Solving your problem." I stared at the check, at the amount written in bold, confident strokes. Exactly the sum I needed, plus a little more. Shock gave way to indignation. "I can't accept that," I said firmly, pushing his hand away. "I don't take charity, especially not from men I barely know." Alessandro didn't withdraw the check. "It's not charity. Consider it an advance." "An advance on what?" His gaze held mine steadily. "I need an assistant. Someone to help manage my affairs while I'm in the United States. The position comes with a generous salary and benefits." "An assistant," I repeated skeptically. "And you're offering this job to a bartender you met less than 24 hours ago?" "I'm offering it to a woman who clearly has potential beyond mixing drinks," he countered. "Someone intelligent, observant, and in need of an opportunity." The offer was tempting, so tempting my fingers itched to reach for the check. But the rational part of my brain screamed warnings. What would this job entail exactly? "Initially, you would accompany me to business meetings, take notes, help organize my schedule. As you learn more about the business, your responsibilities would increase accordingly." He paused. "The check is yours regardless of your decision about the job. Consider it a gesture of goodwill." I shook my head. "I don't accept money for nothing." A flash of admiration crossed his face. "Your integrity does you credit, Ellie. But I assure you, I never give anything for nothing." The ominous undertone in his words sent a shiver down my spine. But before I could respond, the first course arrived. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as we made our way through a meal more exquisite than anything I'd tasted since leaving culinary school. Alessandro proved to be a surprisingly engaging dinner companion, knowledgeable about food, art, and travel. He spoke of his home in Sicily with such vivid detail that I could almost smell the lemon groves and feel the Mediterranean breeze. "You should see it someday," he said, watching me over the rim of his wineglass. "Sicily in spring is like nowhere else on earth." "Maybe in another life," I laughed. "My passport's collecting dust in a drawer somewhere." Something in his expression shifted, a determination settling over his features that I couldn't interpret. "Life is full of unexpected journeys, Ellie." As dessert was cleared away, I realized with a start that we'd been talking for nearly 3 hours. The sky had darkened to a deep indigo, stars visible despite the city lights. "I should go," I said reluctantly. "I have an early shift tomorrow." Alessandro nodded, though he made no move to call for the check. "Have you considered my offer, the job?" In the pleasant haze of good food and better conversation, I'd almost forgotten. "I'm still not sure. Let me drive you home," he suggested. "We can discuss the details on the way." Warning bells clanged in my head. Getting into a car with a man I barely knew, no matter how charming, was not something I typically did. But then again, nothing about this evening had been typical. "I can take a cab," I insisted. "At this hour? In this city?" He shook his head. I would not be a gentleman if I allowed that. Before I could argue further, he was guiding me toward the elevator, his hand resting lightly at the small of my back. The touch was respectful, yet somehow possessive, sending a confusing mixture of alarm and excitement through me. A sleek black car with tinted windows waited at the hotel entrance. One of the security men I'd noticed earlier held the door open for us, his expression remaining carefully neutral as I slid into the plush leather back seat. Alessandro followed, sitting close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Your address?" he prompted as the driver started the engine. I hesitated, then gave him directions to my apartment building in a neighborhood that would clearly not impress him. As we pulled away from the hotel, I noticed a second black car following closely behind. "More security?" I asked, nodding toward the tailing vehicle. Alessandro's expression remained impassive. As I said, a necessary precaution. For an import-export businessman? He turned those penetrating blue eyes on me. "The world can be dangerous, Ellie, especially for those with valuable assets." The way he looked at me as he said, "valuable assets," made me wonder if he was referring to more than just material goods. We rode in silence for several minutes, the soft hum of the engine and the occasional crackle of a radio from the front seat, the only sounds. Finally, Alessandro spoke again. "The job offer is genuine. You would be well compensated, and I assure you the work itself is legitimate." "Why me?" I asked, the question that had been nagging at me all evening. "You could hire anyone with actual qualifications. Perhaps I prefer someone who hasn't been taught to think in conventional ways." His voice dropped slightly. "Or perhaps I simply enjoy your company." Heat rose to my cheeks. "Mr. Ricci." "Alessandro," he corrected gently. "Alessandro," I amended. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't mix business and whatever this is." A smile ghosted across his lips. "Wise policy." "But sometimes, Ellie, life presents opportunities that defy our carefully constructed rules." The car slowed as we approached my building, a faded 5-story walk-up that had seen better days. I saw Alessandro take in the crumbling facade, the security gate with its broken lock, the flickering streetlight that never seemed to get fixed despite numerous complaints. "This is me," I said, suddenly embarrassed by the stark contrast between my world and his. He didn't comment on the building's condition. Instead, he reached into his pocket and produced both the check from earlier and a business card. "The offer remains open, both offers." He placed them in my hand, his fingers lingering against mine. "Think about it tonight. Call me in the morning with your decision." As I stepped out of the car, he added, "And Ellie, lock your door. This neighborhood isn't safe for a woman alone." I watched as the black car pulled away, followed by its silent shadow. Only when they disappeared around the corner did I look down at the items in my hand. The check, with its life-changing amount, and the business card with just a name and number. Little did I know that as I climbed the stairs to my apartment, Alessandro Ricci was already setting in motion events that would irrevocably alter my life's course. That even as I struggled with the decision of whether to accept his offer, other forces were making decisions for me. I entered my apartment, double-checking the lock as he'd instructed, and placed the check and card on my kitchen counter. They seemed to pulse with potential, a gateway to another life so vastly different from my own that I could barely imagine it. That night, I dreamed of blue eyes watching me from the shadows, and woke with his name on my lips, Alessandro. Even in sleep, he had begun to claim me. What I didn't realize then was that he had always intended to. From the moment I collided with him in that crowded bar, my fate had been sealed. I just hadn't read the contract yet. Morning came with no clarity. I stared at the check and business card while sipping cheap instant coffee, weighing my options. The sensible part of me knew I should tear up both, call my mother, and figure out another solution. But every time I reached for the paper, I hesitated, Alessandro's words echoing in my mind. "I never give anything for nothing." What exactly would I be giving in return? My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. It was Marco from the bar. "Ellie, don't come in today," he said without preamble. "What? Why?" "I'm scheduled for a double." His voice lowered conspiratorially. "That guy you were talking to last night? Do you have any idea who he is?" My pulse quickened. He said his name is Alessandro Ricci. He works in import-export. Marco's laugh held no humor. "Import-export, right. Listen, some guys came by this morning asking about you. Serious guys in expensive suits. They didn't say much, but they made it clear you're to be given time off if you need it." A chill ran through me. "What do you mean, asking about me? They wanted to know how long you've worked here, if you're reliable, that sort of thing. Like a reference check, but way more intense." He paused. "Ellie, be careful. These aren't the kind of people you mess with." "Who are they?" I pressed, fear beginning to curdle in my stomach. "The word is Ricci's connected. Like Italian mob connected. His family controls half the ports in Sicily and has interests all over Europe. They've been expanding into Miami the past year." Another pause. "Whatever he offered you, think hard before you accept." After hanging up, I sank onto my worn couch, Marco's warning ringing in my ears. Had I really had dinner with a mafioso? The idea seemed ludicrous, like something from a movie, but then I remembered the security detail, the way people moved out of his path at the bar, the vague description of his work. My phone rang again. Unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Ellie." Alessandro's voice sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Have you considered my offer?" I swallowed hard. "I have some concerns." "Such as?" "Such as who you really are, Alessandro. I've heard rumors." A moment of silence stretched between us. "I see. And what have you heard exactly? That you're not just an import-export. That you're connected." His soft chuckle carried through the line. Connected. An interesting choice of words. Would it change your decision if I confirmed these rumors? The directness of his response caught me off guard. I had expected denials, not this calm acknowledgement. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I don't know anything about that world. Perhaps that's why I find you refreshing, Ellie. Your perspective is unclouded." His tone shifted, becoming more businesslike. "I won't insult you with lies. My family has interests that extend beyond conventional business, but what I'm offering you is legitimate work." I clutched the phone tighter. "And if I say no, then you say no. The check is still yours, no strings attached. You'll never hear from me again." He paused. "But I don't think that's what you want." Was he right? The thought of never seeing him again created an unexpected hollow feeling in my chest. What did that say about me? "I need time to think," I said finally. "Of course. But don't take too long. I leave for New York tomorrow morning." After we disconnected, I paced my small apartment, weighing options that all seemed equally impossible. Accept money from a man who might be in the Mafia. Turn down the only solution to my mother's foreclosure. Take a job that could lead anywhere, or nowhere good. My decision came not from careful deliberation, but from the harsh ring of my phone. My mother, voice cracking with tears, telling me the bank had moved up the deadline. Payment by tomorrow or eviction proceedings would begin immediately. With shaking hands, I dialed Alessandro's number. "I'll take the job," I said, when he answered. No preamble necessary. "I thought you might." The satisfaction in his voice should have alarmed me. "Pack a bag. My driver will collect you in an hour." "An hour? Where am I going?" "New York with me. We have business there for a few days." Panic flared. "I can't just leave. I have..." "Your shift at the bar? Already handled. Your rent? I've arranged for it to be paid through the end of the month. Your mother's situation? The check will be deposited electronically today." His tone brooked no argument. 1 hour, Ellie. Pack for cool weather." He hung up before I could respond, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. The speed with which he had dismantled every obstacle terrified me almost as much as it impressed me. What kind of power did this man wield that he could rearrange my life with a few phone calls? Exactly 1 hour later, a knock came at my door. The same driver from last night stood in the hallway, expressionless as he took my hastily packed suitcase. He led me to the now familiar black car where, to my surprise, Alessandro waited in the back seat. "I wasn't expecting you to come personally," I said as I slid in beside him. He studied me with those piercing blue eyes. Your first day working for me, Ellie. I wanted to ensure you were comfortable with the arrangement. I wasn't, not remotely, but I nodded anyway. As the car pulled away from my building, I felt a strange sense of leaving more than just my apartment behind. I was crossing a threshold into a world I didn't understand, with rules I didn't know. Alessandro handed me a slim leather folio. Your employment contract. Review it during the flight. Flight? I echoed weakly. His lips curved into that almost smile. Did you think we were driving to New York? Of course we weren't. Nothing in Alessandro Ricci's world moved at normal speed or operated by normal rules. Within 2 hours of his phone call, I found myself boarding a private jet at Miami International Airport, my $20 suitcase looking woefully out of place against the aircraft's luxurious interior. Make yourself comfortable, Alessandro instructed, gesturing to one of the cream leather seats. The flight is just under 3 hours. I sank into the indicated seat, overwhelmed by the rapid changes. A flight attendant, because of course a private jet had its own attendant, offered me champagne, which I declined in favor of water. My head needed to stay clear. As we took off, I opened the contract. The terms were both better and more restrictive than I'd anticipated. The salary was staggering, more than 10 times what I made at the bar. Housing would be provided as needed. Health insurance, retirement plan, even a clothing allowance were all included. But the confidentiality clauses were extensive, and the termination terms heavily favored the employer. Questions? Alessandro asked, watching me from his seat across the small aisle. Several, I admitted. This salary, it's too much for an assistant with no experience. It's appropriate for the level of discretion and flexibility required. He leaned forward slightly. I expect absolute loyalty, Ellie. That's what I'm paying for. The intensity in his gaze made me shift uncomfortably. And if I can't provide that, then this arrangement will end, and you will return to your previous life, minus any benefits you've received. His tone was matter of fact, but I don't think it will come to that. You strike me as someone who honors her commitments. I was. That had always been my problem. I stuck with things, with people, long after I should have walked away, like my ex-boyfriend, whose gambling habit had drained my savings and left me with nothing but trust issues and a wariness of men who made big promises. There's something else, Alessandro continued, interrupting my thoughts. Something not in the contract. My stomach tightened. What? The nature of my business means I occasionally attend social functions where arriving with a companion is expected. As my assistant, you would accompany me to these events. As your date? I clarified, frowning. As my colleague. He corrected smoothly, though certain assumptions might be made by others. I understood the implication. You want people to think we're involved. He shrugged elegantly. What people think is their business. What matters is that you conduct yourself appropriately and represent my interests. It felt like another layer of complication in an already complicated arrangement. But I nodded reluctantly. I can do that. Alessandro studied me for a long moment, then seemed satisfied. Sign the contract, and we'll consider it settled. With a deep breath, I signed my name on the indicated line, feeling vaguely like I was signing away more than just my employment status. Alessandro took the contract, signed his own name with a flourish, and tucked it back into the folio. Welcome to Ricci Enterprises, Ellie Moore. New York greeted us with steel-gray skies and a bitter wind that cut through my thin Miami jacket, like it wasn't even there. Another black car waited on the tarmac, whisking us directly from the plane to what Alessandro informed me was his Manhattan apartment. Apartment, it turned out, was a modest term for what was essentially a penthouse occupying the top 2 floors of a sleek high-rise in Tribeca. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views of the city, while the interior featured a minimalist design in cool tones of gray, white, and blue. You'll stay here during our time in New York, Alessandro informed me, leading me through the space. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. Take some time to settle in and change. We have dinner reservations at 8. Dinner? With whom? I asked, trying to keep up with the rapid pace of events. Business associates, he replied vaguely. Wear something appropriate. If you don't have suitable attire, there are options in your closet. Before I could question this presumptuous preparation, He disappeared into what I assumed was his office, leaving me to find my own way upstairs. The room designated as mine was larger than my entire Miami apartment, with a king-sized bed and its own marble bathroom. And true to his word, the walk-in closet contained not just empty hangers but a selection of dresses, all exactly my size, with price tags that made me gasp. Designer names I'd only seen in magazines hung before me, along with shoes, handbags, and even lingerie still in its packaging. Unnerved by this level of preparation, how long had he been planning this? I showered quickly and selected the most conservative of the dresses, a black sheath with a modest neckline and hem that fell just below the knee. Paired with simple heels and minimal jewelry from my own meager collection, I hoped I looked professional rather than like what I feared others would assume, a rich man's plaything. When I descended the stairs, Alessandro was waiting in the living room, now dressed in a different suit that fit him with the same impeccable precision as the one from dinner. His eyes traveled over me, expression unreadable. "The dress suits you," he said finally. "Did you personally select it?" I asked, unable to keep a hint of accusation from my voice. He shook his head. "I gave specifications to my housekeeper. She handled the details. Somehow, that didn't make me feel better." "Specifications? Size, style, appropriate for business functions. Nothing more personal than that, if that's your concern." He checked his watch. "We should go. The car is waiting." The restaurant was another exercise in opulence, old-world elegance with modern touches, where waiters moved like silent shadows and wine was poured from bottles without labels. Our dining companions, a trio of middle-aged men with hard eyes and expensive watches, greeted Alessandro with a mixture of respect and wariness that spoke volumes about their relationship. They cast curious glances my way, as Alessandro introduced me simply as my new assistant, Miss Moore. I felt their assessments like physical touches, categorizing me, measuring my potential threat or value. One of them, a heavy-set man with salt and pepper hair, lingered over my hand a moment too long when we shook, his gaze openly appreciative. "Where did you find such a beautiful assistant, Alessandro?" he asked in heavily accented English. "Not in New York, certainly. We would have noticed her before. Miss Moore is from Georgia," Alessandro replied coolly, "and she is here to work, Vincenzo, not to be admired like a painting." Vincenzo laughed, releasing my hand. "Always so serious, our Alessandro, but you cannot blame a man for appreciating beauty when he sees it." Throughout dinner, I observed more than I participated. The conversation flowed between English and Italian, often switching mid-sentence when the topic grew more sensitive. I noted how Alessandro controlled the discussion with subtle gestures and carefully chosen words, never raising his voice yet somehow dominating every exchange. They were discussing shipping routes and import regulations, seemingly legitimate business concerns. But undercurrents of something else ran beneath the surface, references to protection, to competing interests, to making examples. Nothing explicitly illegal was mentioned, yet I had the distinct impression that the true conversation was happening in code. As dessert was served, Vincenzo turned his attention to me again. "And what did you do before becoming Alessandro's assistant, Miss Moore? You don't strike me as the typical executive secretary." Before I could answer, Alessandro interjected smoothly. "Miss Moore was a chef. She trained professionally. The lie, or rather the stretching of truth, surprised me, but I kept my expression neutral. "A chef," Vincenzo exclaimed. "How marvelous. You must cook for us sometime." "Perhaps," I murmured noncommittally. Alessandro's hand settled on the back of my chair, not quite touching me but establishing a clear boundary. "Miss Moore's culinary talents are reserved for select occasions, Vincenzo. Now, about the Miami terminal situation." The conversation shifted again, and I felt Alessandro's subtle pressure on my back, a silent commendation for following his lead. The remainder of the dinner passed in similar fashion, with business discussions interspersed with personal inquiries that Alessandro deftly deflected. When we finally returned to the penthouse, I was exhausted from the tension of maintaining a facade I didn't fully understand. "You did well," Alessandro said, as we entered the living room. "Better than I expected for your first night." "What exactly was I doing?" I asked, slipping off the painful heels with relief. Besides acting as window dressing? His expression hardened slightly at my tone. You were observing, learning. Those men are important to our operations in New York. How they perceive you affects how they perceive me. And how should they perceive me? I challenged, too tired for caution. Alessandro stepped closer, his presence suddenly overwhelming in the dimly lit room. As someone of value to me, someone under my protection, his voice dropped lower. Someone who belongs to me. The possessiveness in his words sent a conflicting wave of alarm and excitement through my body. I don't belong to anyone, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. He reached out, his fingers barely grazing my cheek. Don't you, Ellie? You signed a contract. You accepted my money. You're wearing clothes I provided, sleeping in a bed I own, eating food I pay for. His eyes held mine, inescapable. In my world, that creates certain obligations. I stepped back, needing distance from his magnetic pull. The contract was for employment, not ownership. There are many kinds of contracts, Ellie. Some written, some understood. He moved toward the stairs, pausing at the bottom. Rest well. Tomorrow will be a busy day. As he disappeared upstairs, I sank onto the couch, my mind racing. What had I gotten myself into? The lines between employer and something else entirely were already blurring, and it was only my first day. I didn't yet understand that Alessandro Ricci didn't believe in lines at all, only in what he wanted and how to get it. And somehow, for reasons I couldn't fathom, what he wanted was me. The next morning, I woke to the sound of rainfall against the floor-to-ceiling windows. For a disorienting moment, I didn't recognize my surroundings. The luxurious bedding, the expansive room, the Manhattan skyline shrouded in mist. Then reality crashed back. I was in Alessandro Ricci's penthouse, his new assistant, bound by a contract I'd signed in haste and desperation. I found a note slipped under my door, written in elegant script, meetings until noon. Help yourself to breakfast. Car will collect you at 12:30. The penthouse was silent as I made my way downstairs, suggesting Alessandro had already left. In the kitchen, a spread of pastries, fruit, and coffee waited on the counter, still warm. Someone had been here recently, the housekeeper Alessandro had mentioned, presumably. As I sipped coffee that cost more per pound than I usually spent on groceries in a week, I contemplated my new reality. My mother had called late last night, crying with relief that the bank had received the payment. Her home was safe for now. The price for that security was my presence here, in this beautiful cage, with a man whose true nature and intentions remained a mystery. At precisely 12:30, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Car waiting downstairs. The same expressionless driver from Miami held the door as I slid into the back seat, surprised to find Alessandro already inside, reviewing documents on a tablet. Good morning, he said without looking up. I trust you slept well? Well enough, I replied cautiously. Where are we going? He finally glanced at me, those piercing blue eyes assessing my appearance. I'd dressed in the most conservative outfit I could find among the provided clothes, tailored black pants and a cream silk blouse. You look appropriate, he noted, answering a question I hadn't asked. We're attending a charity luncheon at the Pierre. Many influential people will be present. This is primarily a networking event, so stay close and observe. What am I observing exactly? Alessandro's lips curved slightly. Relationships. Who speaks to whom? Who avoids whom? In my business, information is as valuable as any commodity we ship. The Pierre Hotel exuded old-world elegance, its ballroom transformed into a sea of white-clothed tables adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. As we entered, I became acutely aware of the subtle shift in the room's energy. Conversations paused, heads turned. Eyes followed Alessandro's progress through the crowd. His hand settled at the small of my back, guiding me with the lightest pressure. The touch was proprietary, sending a clear message to anyone watching. This woman is with me. Alessandro, a silver-haired woman approached, air-kissing both his cheeks. How lovely to see you. And who is your charming companion? Mrs. Harrington. May I present Ellie Moore, my new assistant. Ellie, Victoria Harrington, chairs this charity's board. I shook her hand, noting the calculating look beneath her sociable smile. A pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Harrington. Assistant? She raised a perfectly groomed eyebrow. How professional. Tell me, dear, how did you and Alessandro connect? Before I could answer, Alessandro intervened smoothly. Ellie has a background in culinary arts. She impressed me with her attention to detail and discretion. Mrs. Harrington's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened slightly. How fascinating. Well, I must greet the other guests. Do enjoy the luncheon. As she walked away, Alessandro leaned close to my ear. Victoria Harrington's husband owns significant real estate along the eastern seaboard, properties we sometimes utilize. She's also the worst gossip in Manhattan. By dinner, everyone will know exactly who you are, or who they think you are. And who do they think I am? I whispered back. His eyes met mine, intense and unreadable, my weakness. The comment unsettled me deeply. Throughout the luncheon, I felt the weight of curious stares and whispered speculation. Alessandro introduced me to countless people, politicians, business leaders, socialites, all of whom regarded me with varying degrees of interest, suspicion, or thinly veiled disdain. I played my part as instructed, speaking little, observing much. Alessandro moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his charisma and authority evident in every interaction. People deferred to him instinctively, even those who clearly held significant power themselves. By the time we left, my head was spinning with names, connections, and the complex social web Alessandro navigated so effortlessly. You're learning quickly, he commented as we returned to the car. You notice things others miss. I wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an observation. Those people, they all know what you really do, don't they? Alessandro studied me for a moment. Some know. Some suspect. Some prefer not to know the details of how their interests are protected. His expression grew serious. Never underestimate the willingness of respectable people to look the other way when it benefits them. Back at the penthouse, I expected him to disappear into his office again. Instead, he gestured for me to follow him into a room I hadn't explored, a study lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive desk of dark wood. It's time you understood your role more clearly, he said, indicating I should sit in one of the leather chairs facing the desk. He remained standing, towering over me. You've signed the contract. You've accepted the position. Now you need to know what that really means. My mouth went dry. I thought I was your assistant. You are. But in my world, that title encompasses more than administrative duties. He began to pace slowly. I'm the head of the Ricci family business. We control shipping routes throughout the Mediterranean and along the East Coast. We have interests in construction, waste management, and certain entertainment venues. I swallowed hard, recognizing the euphemisms. Illegal interests. Some activities fall into gray areas of legality, he acknowledged without emotion. My family has operated this way for generations. We provide services where traditional businesses cannot or will not. We protect those under our care. We maintain order. By threatening people? By hurting them? Alessandro stopped pacing, his gaze sharpening. Violence is a last resort, but yes, sometimes necessary. Does that frighten you? It should have. It absolutely should have sent me running for the door. Instead, I found myself oddly calm. What does this have to do with me? As my assistant, you'll be privy to sensitive information. You'll attend meetings where business is discussed openly. You'll see things that could be compromising. He leaned against the desk, bringing his face level with mine. Your loyalty is not optional, Ellie. It's the only thing keeping you safe. The threat was implicit, but clear. Are you saying I'm in danger? Not from me. His voice softened unexpectedly. Never from me. But my world has enemies, people who would use any perceived weakness against me. He reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. That's why they must believe you belong to me completely. It's the only way I can ensure your protection. The touch lingered, sparking an unwelcome heat that spread through my body. I pulled back slightly. I didn't ask for your protection. You did the moment you accepted my offer. His hand dropped, but his eyes held mine. There's no half measure here, Ellie. You're either entirely in my world or entirely outside it, and if you choose to leave now, you can never return to your old life either. It's too late for that. Fear and anger flared simultaneously. That sounds like a threat. It's reality. Alessandro straightened, his expression softening slightly. I don't want to frighten you. I want you to understand the situation clearly so you can make an informed choice. What choice? You just said I can't go back to my old life. You can't go back to Miami, to that bar. Too many people know you've connected with me, but I can arrange a new start for you elsewhere. New identity, new location, enough money to begin again. He paused. Or you can stay, fulfill your contract, and perhaps discover opportunities you never imagined possible. The offer of escape should have been tempting. It was what any sane person would choose, run from the dangerous man and his criminal empire. But some inexplicable pull kept me rooted in place. Why me? I asked again. The question that had haunted me since our first meeting. Out of all the people you could have chosen, why pick a random bartender from Miami? Something flickered in Alessandro's eyes. A hesitation, perhaps even vulnerability. That's a conversation for another time, he said finally. For now, I need your decision. Stay or go. But know this, if you stay, you're mine, Ellie. In every way that matters, the possessiveness in his voice should have repelled me. Instead, it sent a forbidden thrill down my spine. What kind of person did that make me? I'll stay, I heard myself say, the words emerging before I'd consciously decided. For now, at least, until I understand what this is really about. Relief flashed across his features, quickly masked by his usual controlled expression. A wise choice. He moved toward the door. We have a dinner engagement tonight, something more private than last night. Be ready at 7. After he left, I remained seated, trying to process the conversation. Alessandro had essentially admitted he was a crime boss, had implied I could be in danger, had all but claimed ownership of me, and still, I had agreed to stay. What did that say about me, or about him, that he could inspire such reckless disregard for my own safety? That evening found me in a black dress, more formal than anything I'd ever owned, seated across from Alessandro in a dimly lit restaurant so exclusive it had no sign outside. We were the only diners in a private room with walls of wine bottles and a single table set with crystal and silver. No business associates tonight? I asked as the sommelier poured a ruby-red wine into delicate glasses. No, tonight is about us. The simple statement hung in the air between us, weighted with implication. This was no business dinner. It was something dangerously close to a date. There shouldn't be an us, I said quietly. You're my employer. Alessandro's blue eyes reflected the candlelight. In my world, relationships aren't confined to convenient categories. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me something, Ellie. If we had met under different circumstances, if I were just a man and you just a woman, would you still feel this pull between us? The directness of the question took my breath away. Don't lie, he interrupted gently. Not to me. Never to me. I looked down at my plate, unable to meet his intense gaze. Yes, I admitted finally. I would still feel it. His hand covered mine on the table, warm and surprisingly gentle. Then perhaps fate has been kinder to us than you realize. That night changed everything. Over candlelight and wine, Alessandro revealed pieces of himself I hadn't expected to find. A childhood in Sicily spent more among books than people, a passion for classical music, a deep loyalty to family that bordered on reverence. He spoke of his father's death 5 years ago, and the weight of responsibility that had fallen to him as the eldest son. I never wanted this life, he confessed, swirling the last of his wine. I studied architecture at university. I had dreams of building, of creating something lasting. What happened? I asked, genuinely curious about the path that had led him to become the man across from me. A shadow crossed his face. My father was murdered by a rival family. There was no choice after that. Blood demands blood. The casual way he referenced violence should have horrified me. Instead, I found myself reaching across the table to touch his hand. I'm sorry about your father. His fingers curled around mine, the simple contact sending electricity through my veins. You have a gentle heart, Ellie. It's why I... He trailed off, releasing my hand. It's getting late. We should return. The ride back to the penthouse was charged with unspoken tension. Alessandro sat closer than necessary, his thigh occasionally brushing against mine with the car's movement. Each accidental touch felt deliberate, provocative. In the elevator up to the penthouse, he finally broke the silence. I wasn't entirely honest with you before. My pulse quickened. About what? About why I chose you. The elevator doors opened to the private foyer of his apartment, but he made no move to exit. It wasn't random, Ellie. Nothing in my life is random. Before I could question him further, he stepped out, holding the door for me. I followed him into the dimly lit living room, where he went straight to the bar and poured 2 glasses of amber liquid. Your father, he said, handing me one of the glasses. Did he ever mention someone named Paolo Ricci? I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. My father died when I was 3. I barely remember him. Alessandro nodded, as if confirming something to himself. Paolo was my uncle, my father's youngest brother. He took a careful sip of his drink. He died in Georgia 23 years ago. The timeline matched perfectly with my father's death. What are you saying? Your father, James Moore, worked for my family as a courier. He was trusted, valuable. Alessandro's eyes held mine steadily. Until he wasn't. The room seemed to tilt around me. My father was an insurance salesman. He died in a car accident. That's what your mother told you. His voice was gentle but unwavering. The truth is more complicated. I set my untouched drink down with a shaking hand. Tell me. Alessandro moved closer, his expression softening. Your father was skimming from deliveries. Small amounts at first, then growing bolder. My uncle was sent to address the situation. He paused. Neither man survived their meeting. The implications crashed over me like a tidal wave. My father, a criminal, killed by Alessandro's family. My entire understanding of my past suddenly revealed as fiction. You've known who I was all along, I whispered, backing away from him. This wasn't about my mother's house or needing an assistant. This was about... what? Revenge? He caught my wrist, preventing my retreat. If I wanted revenge, Ellie, I wouldn't have pulled you out of that bar into a better life. I wouldn't have protected you. I would have destroyed you. Then why? I demanded, trying unsuccessfully to pull free of his grip. Why seek me out after all these years? His thumb traced circles on my inner wrist, the gentle motion at odds with the intensity of his gaze. Because the moment I saw your photograph in the file, I knew I had to meet you. And when I did, when I saw you moving through that crowded bar with such quiet dignity despite everything life had thrown at you, I knew you were meant to be mine. Yours, I repeated, the word both repellent and thrilling. I'm not a possession to be claimed, Alessandro. No, he agreed, pulling me infinitesimally closer. You're far more dangerous than that. You're the one thing I never expected to find. A weakness I'm willing to embrace. His free hand came up to cup my cheek, and despite my anger, my confusion, my sense of betrayal, I found myself leaning into his touch. I should hate you, I whispered. Perhaps you should, he acknowledged, his face now inches from mine, but you don't. His lips met mine with surprising gentleness, a question rather than a demand, and God help me, I answered, my body betraying all rational thought as I melted into him, my hands finding their way to his shoulders, his chest, the solid warmth of him anchoring me in a world suddenly turned upside down. The kiss deepened, grew hungry, Alessandro's control slipping as his hands tangled in my hair, traced the curve of my spine, pulled me flush against him. I could feel his heart racing to match my own, the evidence of his desire pressing against me. Ellie, he breathed against my lips. Tell me to stop, and I will. This isn't part of our contract. This is your choice. My choice. Perhaps the first real one I'd had since entering his orbit. I should have pushed him away, demanded answers about my father, about the lies I'd been told all my life. Instead, I whispered, "Don't stop," and sealed my fate. What followed was a revelation, Alessandro lifting me effortlessly, carrying me up the stairs to his bedroom, a sanctuary of masculine elegance I hadn't yet seen, his hands reverent on my skin as he undressed me, his eyes darkening with desire as he took in every inch revealed. The weight of him above me, the surprising tenderness in his touch that gradually gave way to passionate urgency as we moved together. In those moments, it didn't matter that he was a crime boss, that he'd orchestrated our meeting, that my father's blood might metaphorically be on his family's hands. All that mattered was the way he made me feel. Desired, protected, cherished. Mine, he murmured against my skin as we reached the pinnacle together. Always mine. And in that moment of perfect vulnerability, I believed it was true. Later, as we lay tangled in his sheets, reality began to creep back in. Alessandro traced lazy patterns on my bare shoulder, seemingly content, while questions tumbled through my mind. "Tell me about my father," I finally said, my voice quiet in the darkness. "The truth." His hand stilled momentarily before resuming its gentle exploration. "He was young when he started working for my family, younger than you are now. Smart, charming, good at making people trust him. That's why my father valued him. What happened? Why did he start? Stealing?" Alessandro sighed, his breath warm against my hair. "Your mother was pregnant with you. He wanted out of the life, wanted to be a proper family man. But leaving our organization isn't simple. The things he knew, the people he could identify, it was too risky. So he tried to take enough money to disappear," I surmised. "Yes. And he might have succeeded if he hadn't gotten greedy. The final amount he took was substantial enough to warrant direct intervention." I swallowed hard. "Did your uncle kill him? From what I understand, they killed each other. Your father had a gun. He wasn't expecting my uncle, but he was prepared." Alessandro's arms tightened around me. "The family felt responsible for you and your mother. That's why the insurance policy was so generous. Why the story of an accident was maintained. All these years," I whispered. "My mother never told me. She was protecting you," Alessandro said gently, "as I intend to do for the rest of your life." I pulled back slightly to see his face. "Is that what this is? Protection? Obligation because of what your family did to mine?" His expression hardened. "What I feel for you has nothing to do with obligation, Ellie. Yes, I sought you out initially because of the connection. But what's between us now is something else entirely." His fingers traced my cheek, my jaw, my lips. "Tell me you don't feel it too." I couldn't lie. Not to him, not to myself. Whatever had sparked between us that first night at the bar had grown into something powerful. Something that defied the circumstances of our meeting or the truth of our pasts. "I feel it," I admitted. "But I'm afraid of what that says about me. It says you understand something most people never grasp, that life isn't black and white, that good people can do terrible things, and terrible people can love deeply." He kissed me softly. "I've done things that would horrify you, Ellie. I won't pretend otherwise, but with you, I want to be better." Morning brought clarity and decision. I woke before Alessandro, studying his sleeping face, softer in repose, almost boyish despite the shadow of stubble along his jaw. In sleep, the dangerous edge that surrounded him while awake disappeared, revealing the man beneath the power and control. I slipped from the bed, borrowed his shirt, and went downstairs to make coffee, my mind churning with everything I'd learned, everything I'd done, everything that still lay ahead. Alessandro found me on the terrace, watching the sunrise paint Manhattan in gold and pink. He came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing a kiss to my neck. "Having regrets?" he asked quietly. Surprisingly, no. I turned in his embrace to face him. "But I do have conditions." His eyebrow arched, a hint of amusement playing at his lips. "Conditions? If we're going to do this, whatever this is between us, I need to know everything. No more secrets, no more revelations about my past or yours." I met his gaze steadily, "and I won't be involved in anything illegal. I'll be by your side. But my hands stay clean." Alessandro considered me for a long moment, then nodded. "Agreed. Though you should know, I've been working to legitimize our business interests. It's a long process, but necessary for the future I envision." "What future is that?" He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. One where the Ricci name is associated with shipping empires and real estate holdings, not whispered in fear. One where I can take my wife to dinner without armed guards. His hand cupped my cheek. One where our children grow up without the weight of a criminal legacy. You're getting rather ahead of yourself, I said, though my heart raced at his words. I'm a man who plans for the long term, Ellie. His eyes held mine, serious and sincere. From the moment I saw you, you were part of those plans. 6 months later, I stood on the terrace of Alessandro's villa in Sicily, watching the Mediterranean glitter under the setting sun. The scent of lemon blossoms filled the air, exactly as he had described that night in Miami. In the distance, I could hear the sounds of final preparations for tomorrow's event, our wedding. A small affair by Ricci standards, but still grander than anything I could have imagined for myself a year ago. Alessandro appeared beside me, slipping an arm around my waist. Having second thoughts, soon to be Mrs. Ricci, I leaned into him, marveling at how naturally we now fit together. Not about you. Never about you. He kissed me, tender and possessive all at once. You shouldn't tease a man like me, he murmured against my lips, echoing words from our earliest days. I'm not teasing, I replied, smiling up at him. I'm making a promise. As the sun sank below the horizon, casting the world in shades of gold and shadow, I knew I had found my place, not as Alessandro's possession, but as his equal, his partner, his heart. Our beginning might have been built on secrets and manipulation, but our future would be founded on something stronger: truth, trust, and a love powerful enough to transcend the darkness of our shared past.